صلاح وهوبا الله 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 يا بلادنا الله الله يا بلادنا الله الله يا بلادنا الله الله يا بلادنا الله الله أكبر.
Welcome to a bonus episode of the Elaborate Podcast. This one is about football, but do not adjust your podcast style. I promise it will be interesting. At least I hope so anyway. So you might remember from previous episodes that we have a connection to Egypt through Mary, the Egyptologist / archaeologist. And we've done a few podcasts about that, partially referencing it and talking about it, but also we did one full episode talking about Geir Anderson, who was the Irish Pasha and who had a deep connection to Egypt as well. So if you haven't checked out that episode, I would highly recommend it, as it is a book review. But today we're going to be talking about Cairo, and specifically the Cairo Derby. Now, this article was first published in 2016 in December for a publication called Box to Box Football, because I am a freelance football journalist. Well, all journalists of all descriptions, but also of football. And the following will be an extract from that, looking at the passionately contested Cairo Derby between two teams, Zamalek and Al Ahly. So they're the big hitters. If you think of big kind of rivals in football, you think of Barca, Madrid in Spain, El Clasico. The Glasgow teams of Rangers, Celtic, United against Liverpool in England, and Bayern Munich against Dortmund in Germany, so the list goes on. What has kind of inspired this is basically the idea that, well, Mo Salah, who is the Egyptian king, as he's commonly known, his boots have been put into the British Museum because he's had a phenomenal season, scoring over 40 goals for Liverpool. He's had the best debut season in the Premier League era, and he's won the Golden Boot, the Players' Player of the Season. I think he's also won the Football Writers' Player of the Season as well. And nobody really expected him to do as well as he has done in England, because he was one of the Chelsea rejects, and you can include Kevin De Bruyne in that, and a few other players who were kind of cast off from Chelsea under the stewardship of Jose Mourinho, and they've come back to England after stints abroad and have flourished. De Bruyne at Man City and Salah at my club Liverpool, who he has fired to top four finish in the Premier League. The season's now over there, and a final berth place in the Champions League final against Real Madrid, which is on May 26th, so another week or so for that. So as you can imagine, when a player does good, as they say in football, the country is behind him. So Egyptians are going crazy for Mo Salah. I'm sure a lot of Africans are, because whenever there's a good African footballer, they seem to kind of go behind that footballer as a continent. But particularly in Egypt, he's kind of deified as an amazing guy and player, and stories abound. Well, he goes back to his village once a year and does charitable things and helps people and talks to people, and kind of myths spring up about the things that he's done. Now, I can't verify if he's done all of these things, but I'm sure there's embellishments here and there. And we also reference the Blind Boy podcast quite a lot in this show, and his latest episode, which dropped yesterday, was about that as well, about saints that have cropped up in history, and basically they become popular through myth and false stories, and they kind of catch on and develop a life of their own. Now, of course, Mo Salah is of a man of flesh and blood, so hasn't entered myth status just yet. But with a Champions League victory at stake next week, and also he's the best player for the Egyptian national team. Hopes of their World Cup rest on his shoulders, and they've qualified for the World Cup for the first time in a long time. So if he does have a successful summer and a successful Champions League final, maybe he will elevate from almost myth to full-blown myth and become one of those heroic elite level players like Messi or Ronaldo. And of course as well, he's a fan favourite because he smiles, he looks very pleasant, and he just seems like a nice guy, enjoys playing football, and his range of goals are very creative. He's very witty in a footballing sense, and he does. Yeah, he's just a creative player and full of surprises, and just each kind of goal is like an expression of something different. So yeah, that's why a lot of people like him, myself included. So that's the kind of the intro into this edition of the podcast, which is specifically about Cairo Derby. So we'll be talking about that after a little bit of music, and once that music finishes, it'll probably be playing in the background. I'll launch into the Cairo Derby. The referee's whistle blew. It was a shrill peep that was audible throughout the almost empty Borg El Arab Stadium in Alexandria. The Zamalek bench certainly heard it, given that they were wildly cheering within seconds of Al Ahly's Ahmed Fatty, bandaged in one eye in his blood-red jersey, bundling into Shikabala, Zamalek's talisman and captain. Penalty. His teammate, Morsi, slotted the ball home to make it 2-0 in the 2016 Egyptian Cup final. The White Knights are now 3-1 winners in the end, triumphing in the final match of the season that saw bitter rivals Al Ahly having the best of the league encounters in the better trophy hall, which is fitting for a club that can be also referred to as the Masters of the World, their unofficial nickname. This is no ordinary derby. It is a clash of underdog against the powerhouse in a country where the terrain and classes are divided into upper, middle and lower. It mirrors the El Clasico fault lines found in Spain between Barcelona and Real Madrid, with everyone in Egypt supporting one of the two Cairo-based clubs, either directly or as a second team. You can easily tell what side of the divide an Egyptian man, woman or child is on come Derby Day, with bars and balconies decked out in competing colours of red and white. In addition, the two have dominated the Egyptian league for much of their history, with Al Ahly even going unbeaten in all competitions in 2005. As unpredictable as a beautiful game can be, the origin stories of different clubs follow the same predictable route as any Marvel superhero genesis tale. In the case of Al Ahly, the side was midwifed into existence by their first president, an Englishman by the name of Mitchell Ince. Ince, who was working in the government, did for Ahly what other British expats did for clubs in Latin America and continental Europe. The inception of the team was inspired by wider political movements, and the team's moniker translates as the National, a fact born out of attempts to resist colonisation in the early parts of the 20th century. This was a club run by Arabs, for Arabs. Zamalek, founded by a lawyer, are the posher city neighbours. Tourists and expats flock to this part of Cairo, and the trendy vibe is complemented by the foreign embassies that flow through the district. It is a neighbourhood with an Art Deco style that cuts into the horizon, visible and proud. Under the patronage of the hated King Farouk, the team became known as the Foreigner Team. It was a side chiefly characterised by the hodgepodge 11 of middle-class intellectuals from other countries. Both sets of fans grumble about each other in a way that all football tribes do. Taxi drivers, kids, waiters, and the whole city will relay anecdotes about them. It's not uncommon for the houses and cars of current, and even former, players to be at risk whenever the two sides meet. Fans have long memories, and even goal scorers from derbies gone by must take a little more care when moving around the city, while the heavy police presence at games before the 2011 revolution saw hostilities transferred to youth games. Running contrary to this persistent tension, the feeling is that the derby is also about escapism. Ahly fans want to forget their lack of economic means, if only for a little while. The rivalry has been marked by perceived injustices and slights, a feeling that stretches back almost a century. In 1944, for example, Al Ahly were upset when the Egyptian FA and Zamalek president sanctioned them for sending more than a dozen players to Palestine. Though in recent times, anger toward the Zamalek hierarchy has come most often from Zamalek supporters. Nevertheless, the introduction of foreign referees has improved the situation on the pitch, with passionate fans putting any mistake made by the man in the middle down to incompetence rather than bias. The atmosphere is febrile, with a passion burning with an intensity of a Sekhmet fire. Mariam, my Egyptian friend, is an avid football fan. Every member of the family supports the same team, she explains, and the passion is shared equally, though it's the women that shout the most. She laughs as she tells me about falling off the bed when Al Ahly scored the opener in the 2007 derby. If you're a foreigner, she continues, you'll still be welcomed into any home to watch the game, but you have to shout for their team. At this, she laughs again. 2011, however, was a turning point. Politics and football met, resulting in games behind closed doors, and the derby, briefly, being taken out of the country. It was a moment that saw the ultras from both sides of the divide coming together as one. The revolution was a symbol of the public's dissatisfaction with President Hosni Mubarak. Al Ahly's, Alawi and Zamalek's ultras White Knights helped fight the police and prolong the uprising in the opening weeks, and many ordinary Egyptians saw them as their protectors. Retribution came a year later in Port Said. Numerous Al Ahly fans were murdered by fans of Al Masry. Help was sought from the police by fearful spectators in the stadium, but none was given, while gates leading out of the ground were locked. A prosecutor's report found evidence of collusion between security forces and the fans of Al Masry. Horror visited Zamalek also, as 20 of their fans were killed in a stampede at another game. Police had been firing tear gas into the crowd, but Zamalek did not seek justice for their supporters. Instead, they branded the ultras in general as traitors and terrorists. Some normalcy has returned. Zamalek lifted the 26th Egyptian Cup on home soil, with fans shouting wildly in the stands and the players in red slumping off the field with their heads down and shoulders hunched. Bragging rights for generations had been won, and the city could escape across two halves of football once more. The Egyptian Book of the Dead promises that all things are possible. Who you are is only limited by who you think you are. As profound as this statement is, it overlooks one essential truth of football, that who you are is often defined by who you are not. Red or white, upper or lower class, every league would be poorer without their respective derbies, and Egyptian football would be diminished without the head-to-heads of Al Ahly and Zamalek. Clear your diary for the next instalment of the saga, December 29th. At the end of an often turbulent and unpredictable year, the legacy of a changing Egypt will endure, played out by the two best teams in the country, with decades of history and the associated contretemps squeezed into 90 minutes. In a city famed more for what its ancient dead have done, modern Cairo is alive and kicking when these two sides meet. So that was taken from the edition of the Box to Box magazine entitled Rivalries, which is issue 3 of the magazine, and you can find that quarterly with a new update of stories and articles and things like that, connected by a theme in each issue. So I mentioned in the last paragraph December 29th being the next installment. Of course this is past because this is in 2016, but if you are interested by Egyptian football, you can check out the fixtures for yourself and zero in on the next derby between these two titans of Egyptian football. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. You will find our regular episode again next week with me and Mary. In the meantime, you can find more episodes of the podcast, where you're listening to this on your podcast app, and also on VRTV with our 360 videos. lapramedia.com is our website, and on YouTube you will find us as well. So thank you very much again for listening, and keep watching football.
Indirect tactics, efficiently applied, are inexhaustible as heaven and earth. Unending is the flow of rivers and streams. Like the sun and moon, they end but to begin anew. Like the four seasons, they pass away to return once more.